The SAS, or the Special Air Service, is one of the most secretive but effective units of the British Army. It has a long history and was founded during the Second World War, and today helps in a number of ways, for example counter-terrorism or hostage rescue operations. But the group began under the idea of David Stirling, who formed initially L Detachment, and he recruited only the best to serve in his group. It began life as a commando force that would operate behind enemy lines in North Africa during World War II, and was initially made up of 5 officers and 60 other ranking members. The first mission was a parachute drop in November 1941 to support Operation Crusader, but the mission was a complete disaster at the time. But the second mission went much better, and they attacked 3 airfields in Libya and destroyed around 60 planes, despite the loss of only 2 men. But the Germans during the war greatly feared enemy commandos such as the SAS, and Hitler issued a decree that any of those captured should be executed immediately and shot dead. There were 2 operations in particular conducted by the SAS during World War II that resulted in the executions of a number of members of the Special Air Service. Join us today as we look at the brutal executions of the captured SAS soldiers of World War II, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. The first operation we will look at is Operation Bulbasket, which was conducted by B Squadron of the 1st SAS. The plan was for the men to operate behind enemy lines in occupied France between June and August 1944, east of Poitiers. The plan was to block the Paris to Bordeaux railway line near to the town, and to prevent German reinforcements heading towards the Normandy beaches following D-Day and the Normandy Landings, and in particular they wanted to halt the 2nd SS Panzer Division Dashreich. It would be carried out alongside Operation Houndsworth in the area of Dijon, and intelligence experts believed it would take the Panzer Division 3 days to reach Normandy. The officer in charge of B Squadron was Captain John Tonkin, and 2nd Lieutenant Richard Crisp was acting as the second in command. The pair were briefed on their objectives and were told that the secret agents in France would also help them. A group of soldiers in an advance party, including Captain Tonkin, were taken by Hanley Page Halifax to France and were dropped in. Their drop zone was an area of marshland, and they reached this at 1:37 AM on the early hours of the 6th of June, a number of hours before the D-Day landings began, and the Allied forces began their assault on Normandy. There was some distrust inside the group, but the following morning the advance team met with their SOE contact, who was part of the local armed French resistance. They agreed that Operation Bulbasket would work in the west of the Vienne department near to Poitiers, and the other resistors would work in the east. The aim was to delay reinforcements reaching Normandy, and as mentioned the 2nd SS Panzer Division Dashreich, who it was aimed to halt, had around 15,000 men and 1,400 vehicles, including some of the most feared German tanks. They began their journey to Normandy on the 8th of June, and on the 7th more SAS soldiers were parachuted in, and a second drop occurred on the 11th. Jeeps armed with Vickers K machine guns were also dropped, and when they were on the ground, the SAS then began to prevent reinforcements heading towards Normandy. They set to work destroying railways and also placed landmines, and even patrolled in their jeeps. The men heard of 11 petrol tanks based nearby, and 1 Lieutenant Thomas Stevens embarked on a 75-mile round trip by bicycle to confirm the location of the petrol train. He noticed it was heavily guarded, and then an air attack was launched, and 12 RAF Mosquitoes destroyed it later on. The SAS men regularly moved bases and locations, but the German SS Security Police had been informed where the SAS were based, in a forest near to Verreres. On the 1st of July 1944, they sent agents into the forest to try and locate the camp, and they gathered an assault force. The SAS then tried to find another camp, and the force inside the forest was made up of 40 SAS men. The Germans attacked at dawn, and within a few hours the SAS men had been defeated. They tried to break out of the forest, and a group of 34 of them were ambushed and then captured. The leader of this group, Lieutenant Thomas Stevens, was set upon by German officers, and was then beaten to death by one of them with his rifle butt. 7 captured members of the French resistance were also then shot dead inside of the woods, and their bodies were left there. But the fate of the arrested members of the SAS was sealed, as Hitler had issued the Commando Order, stating that enemy commandos should be shot dead immediately without trial. Captain Tonkin had managed to evade capture, and he then set time pencils in the supplies, which were later detonated and killed a number of Germans. On the 7th of July 1944, the SAS prisoners were taken in lorries to the forest of Saint-Savant, near to the village of Rome. They were all to be shot dead according to the Commando Order, and the men were then forced to line up inside the forest. Each of them was shot dead, and their bodies were left and dumped inside of the forest. The German army and the SS argued over who should carry out the executions, but it was the Wehrmacht who were given the go-ahead to kill the SAS members. The men had been forced to dig their own graves before they were shot by a firing squad at dawn. The bodies were buried then in 3 separate graves. But there were 3 other SS members who had been wounded in their capture, then these were executed using lethal injection inside of a hospital. In total, 34 members of the SAS were executed in the failed operation, along with a downed American pilot and 7 members of the French resistance. The bodies of these men were discovered inside the forest, and a number of the bodies were still wearing Allied uniforms and contained the dog tags that said they were part of Operation Bulbasket. This was of course a huge setback for the SAS. But in the following months there was another operation conducted by the SAS that resulted in mass execution. Operation Loyton was planned between the 12th of August and the 9th of October 1944, and the men were to be parachuted into the Vosges Mountains. This area is in northeastern France and close to the German border. The American Third Army were heading towards this area, but a small SAS advance party was parachuted in there, commanded by Captain Henry Druce. The drop zone was in a very wooded area, around 40 miles west of Strasbourg, and the plan was to contact local French resistance fighters and to carry out reconnaissance in the area and to find targets to locate, as well as a suitable drop zone for the main SAS attack force. These came 18 days later on the 30th of August, and the landing did not go too well. A parachute equipment container that was full of ammunition blew up when it hit the ground, and a resistance member died when trying to move the parachute containers. He apparently thought plastic explosive was in fact cheese, and then it blew up. A man who was also loitering in the woods was detained after he was caught picking mushrooms, and in this the man managed to grab a Sten gun, and he was then shot trying to escape. But the next day the SAS began patrolling and set up observation posts. However, the Germans knew where they were, and they had been betrayed. There were many more Germans in the area than they initially believed, and 5,000 German soldiers were advancing towards the base camp. The SAS were then involved in a number of firefights with Germans, and the Wehrmacht believed there was a bigger enemy force than there actually was. Jeeps armed with machine guns were parachuted in, and the Jeep patrols attacked German road convoys and staff cars, and the SAS went on the aggressive. A patrol under Captain Druce's command then entered the town of Musset and attacked German soldiers, but the enemy could not find the SAS base. To find out this specific information, they rounded up local French people and they arrested 210 men between the ages of 16 and 50. They were interrogated and were then sent to concentration camps, and only 70 ever returned, with the rest dying inside the camps. The plan was for the Americans to eventually relieve the SAS, and the operation, which was now over 2 months in length, was beginning to be wound down. But there was a significant degree of SAS men who had gone missing during the operation, and it's believed that they were captured. The SAS were then ordered to split up into small groups and head towards Allied lines around 40 miles away. One patrol was ambushed and killed by the Waffen SS, but 34 other men failed to make it back to the relative safety. Following the end of the war, investigations occurred to find the whereabouts of these missing SAS men, and it was known that many of them had been killed. The SAS had been disbanded in October 1945, but the authorities looked into what happened during Operation Loyton. They knew of the Commando Order, and the French gave over information that the bodies of a number of SAS soldiers had been found. It was found that 30 SAS men had been executed by the SD, and a number of them had been taken to a concentration camp and killed there. Erich Isselhorst, the leader of the Nazi police in Strasbourg, was executed for his involvement in the killings, and it's believed he was involved in the executions of the French resistance fighters and also the SAS soldiers. He ordered the executions of the captured SAS members, and with this the prisoners had been taken to the banks of the Rhine River on trucks on the 21st of November 1944. The leader of the firing squads was Karl Beck, and he believed it was stupid to leave a mass grave of Allied soldiers close to the front line. The prisoners were kept in jail and were then taken to a local forest, where they were then shot in groups of 3 by a firing squad inside of a bomb crater. They were killed by a gunshot to the head, and with this dozens of SAS men were killed in this way. These 2 operations of the SAS showed how dangerous the Nazis and Germans viewed the detachment of soldiers. The Commando Order, which told Germans what to do with them, was an illegal order, and more executions of British commandos did take place. Following both of the operations, scores of British soldiers were illegally executed, and their stories today are unknown parts of the Second World War, and their stories remain untold. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.